I'm Elise from the crowdfunded translation project, and wanted to just tell you a little bit about what that project is and give you some updates about what I've been doing with your support. The Inessa Armand project. After finishing Kalantai's social basis of the female question, I put out a call for suggestions for the next project. One of those suggestions that I received was to translate the essays and letters of Inessa Armand, Kalantai's predecessor at the Bolshevik women's section. Suppressed by Stalin and never translated into English, Armand's writings enrich our understanding of the Bolshevik women's movement in the run-up to the October Revolution and the early days of revolutionary Russia. With your support, I have been able to translate all of her extant essays and am currently raising the last $1,950 to cover the cost of translating the remainder of her extant works, which at this point is just her correspondence. If you would like to support the project, all contributions are beautiful. You'll find links in the description. The Punto Final project is a project that is really just at its inception. Punto Final, for those unfamiliar with it, i.e. likely most of the people watching this right now, was a magazine edited by Manuel Caviese Donoso that ran from 1965 to the eve of the 1973 CIA-backed coup in Chile, and then from 1989 to 2018, publishing a grand total of 894 issues. In addition to being a platform for theoretical and ideological debate, they were also a source of excellent political journalism. Their real-time analysis of political developments in Chile, the rise of the Unidad Popular, the looming coup, and the limits of electoralism has aged extremely well, and is well worth reading for anyone interested in the period. The Chilean left is sort of in a media bubble, and the Anglosphere left really doesn't do a great job of breaking that bubble and really building connections there. So the discussion that you hear in English about Chile, even in supposed left outlets, such as Jargon, often has little or nothing to do with the state of discussion amongst comrades in Chile. So this is part of my attempts to contribute to sort of breaking down that bubble and fostering some understanding of the thought amongst revolutionaries in Chile, both historically and currently. I have so far translated 7 articles, including a long read on electoralism versus armed struggle called Chile, the Ballad or the Bullet by Punto Final editor Manuel Caviese, and currently am working on various pieces of political analysis from the eve of the electoral campaign that would bring Salvador Allende to power, or at least to government. These include discussions of electoral versus revolutionary strategy and how and to what extent these things can coexist, discussions of US imperialist interference in Chilean politics, One of the challenges of this project, since its inception, has been getting the word out. The billionaire-controlled black box algorithms that dominate our lives don't like small creators or small projects. Nor are they particularly keen on ideological viewpoints that are inconsistent with the whims of billionaires. What's more, they positively detest anyone who isn't paying for reach. And then they turn around and make it ever harder to do even that in a useful way. The result of all this is that there are definitely considerably more people who would be interested in this project than actually see any of my posts about it. And that's why I have a small favor to ask you. Tell your friends about the crowdfunded translation project. Share the completed translations Link the Patreon and the Facebook pages. All those links are in the description. Let people know that this project exists and what it's all about. Let them know that I want to hear their ideas for future crowdfunded translation projects at crowdfunded_translations@elisehendrick.com. And if you've got any ideas, I'd love to hear them. Ultimately, the crowdfunded translation project is for us all. The whole idea is to translate texts that have fallen through the cracks by making it economically viable for a professional translator, i.e. me, to work on them and to make the results freely available to everyone. I think that a lot of great things are coming out of the project, and even more can result from it yet. But it all depends on making the project visible to the people who might benefit from it and consider supporting it. Thank you for watching for this length of time. I hope you found it interesting, and I hope that it will encourage you to get in touch with the crowdfunded translation project, look at our translations, to get in touch with, to get involved with the crowdfunded translation project. Make suggestions, read the translations, let people know that this exists. This could be a great resource, but it's been a real fucker trying to get the word out about it. So thank you very much. Even watching this and commenting and leaving a like and sharing it on your platform.
Well, welcome everybody. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button.
I remember in middle school when you felt self-conscious if you were the last one to go through puberty. That really went topsy-turvy, didn't it?
Sometimes the Hasbara, it's too much explaining yourself and it's too apologetic.
Be sure to hit the notifications bell.
I actually do believe Israel won't just bomb countless civilians.
Be sure to tweet this out. Be sure to put this up on your Facebook.
You have to be kind to people. Be kind to the guys in this mess in the first place.
Put this up on your Reddit.
Chile is a country.
Be sure to cut and paste, a link to this to go into your favorite Facebook chat group.
It's good to see so many normal people in here.
Now, spanking isn't just my deep, dark personal secret. It's America's deep, dark secret.
I've never seen it explained so simply anywhere.
Put this on WhatsApp. Put this on Telegram. Put this on your favorite messenger app.
Hey, implicit connotations! How's everybody doing? And welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel. I'm your host, an Untitled Anarchist Seagull called Elise. Let's see what we've got to look at today. How's everybody doing, chat? It has, as always, been a fucking week. It has been a 7-day period. And let's see. Thought we might start out with a good measure of counterinsurgency bullshit coming from the Young Turfs. Trump and Netanyahu's public feud just got exposed! Okay, first of all, that is just a weird title. If it's a public feud, then it was already exposed. But, yeah, and it says, media got played. See, I don't necessarily think that's the case, because the media are playing this. But, okay. I mean, the
press protects power, and I should say legacy media.
Oh, well, yeah, she should say legacy media, because, of course, the young poly markets certainly don't protect power. I mean, they would never think of protecting power, the young poly markets.
Specifically, right? I think that they are in the position of either cheerleading or providing cover for what's going on right now. And
yes, they are. Just not, of course not, never TYT, never and transphobia, and a transphobian. She would never do that. It's just the other people who take fucking right-wing corporate money who are part of the propaganda system.
Anyone who steps out of line is, any outlet that steps out of line ends up being in the crosshairs of the Ellisons. And so if you don't want Barry Weiss controlling your editorial decisions, then...
No, I want Donald Trump Jr. controlling them. He is, at last I checked, an ill-defined advisor over at Polymarkets, the people who their studio is now named after.
You better play ball with what the U.S. and the Israeli government wants, and in this case, it would be to avoid reporting this story, which is great for you because you
avoid reporting which story? Avoiding reporting on the supposed feud, or avoiding reporting that this is just, once again, some bullshit the White House is spinning in order to create the appearance that they're not actually 100% in control of whatever Israel's doing.
get to report it, and you get the credit for it. One other thing I wanted to bring up is, you know, there's this ongoing and very annoying debate, and I say annoying because every once in a while I even fall for it, and it happened recently, where people like Barack Ravid and the broader media...
Oh, Barack Ravid. Like, if you're wondering why it is that suddenly, that so many people ended up falling for the idea that Israel's the one in the driver's seat, Barack Ravid has played a major role in that. And for his services in propaganda, he actually, I only recently discovered it, this was in Adam Johnson's book, How to Sell a Genocide. He actually was given the White House Correspondents Association reward for doing literally nothing but playing stenographer and laundering sanctioned leaks that were meant to create the impression that Joe Biden was just absolutely blowing his stack, that he was doing everything he possibly could for a ceasefire, but that Netanyahu just wouldn't play ball. I mean, and there was like one after another, and next time, and this one is like, ooh, wow, Biden called Netanyahu an asshole. It's heating up. Game the fuck on. I mean, and one after another, specifically just in order to create the impression that Israel and the U.S. weren't just, you know, that Israel was not just doing exactly what the U.S. wanted, and the U.S. simply was not ordering them to stop, which is, in fact, the truth. We have that confirmed at this point. Hey, Adam, how you doing?
Will put out stories about, ooh, there was a very contentious phone conversation between Netanyahu and Trump. Oh, they disagree. They were fighting. Trump called him a piece of crap. Not literally, but I'm paraphrasing. You know,
Wait. What did he actually call him then? I know he apparently said in the most recent call, everybody hates Israel, which, I mean, is about right at this point.
Basically told him, everyone hates you, you're crazy, you're effing crazy, whatever. I don't believe any of it, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and say I was wrong in believing the whole narrative.
Because you realize that it makes absolutely no sense that a colonial regime that is totally dependent on the U.S. and is currently increasingly on the brink of collapse could possibly be in any position to say anything other than yes sir when a U.S. president calls, because you realize that just doesn't make any fucking sense.
About Trump having a super harsh conversation with Benjamin Netanyahu, because I think it's all kabuki theater, when in reality, behind the scenes, Israel and the United States are 100% working together. They are in cahoots, and we have deployed troops in Israel to...
Which, it's worth noting, is something Israel was always against until very recently. They didn't like the idea of U.S. troop deployments on what they're calling their territory, you know, within the Green Line, because of sovereignty.
Potentially parachute into Iran to retrieve enriched uranium. risking their lives on behalf of Israel's BS cover story.
Oh, well, no. Risking their lives on behalf of the U.S.'s desire not to have anyone in a strategic region that doesn't play ball. And I mean, at this point, and this isn't just Iran, part of the problem, part of the reason that this just never seems to end, and has no end in sight, is precisely that in October 2023, the U.S. and Israeli deterrence got completely destroyed. The entire illusion that nobody would dare fuck with them because they had all of this high-tech hardware and they could kick anybody's ass, that just completely evaporated in roughly 30 minutes for anyone who was paying attention. And plenty of people were paying attention. And ever since then, it's been one attempt after another to restore some kind of deterrence, some kind of sense that this, that Israel and the U.S. are people that you don't fuck with. And every single time, the Palestinian resistance and their regional allies have fucked with them quite successfully, just absolutely humiliated them one way after another. And the trouble is, at a certain point, you've got two options there. Either you can admit that you didn't do well, you just, you take the L, you lost, and you accept a new arrangement where you're going to have to take into account somebody else's concerns for a change, something the U.S. is not used to having to do. I mean, like, when the Soviet Union was around, they had to do that occasionally, and to a certain extent, China's economic power means they have to kind of take their stuff into account. But Iran? They're not used to having to take anything into account when it comes to Iran. If they have to suddenly take what, Iran's concerns and Iran's security into account and shit like that, that is the end of the world as far as they're concerned. And so they won't do it. They could do it, but they won't do it. Because they have to somehow show that they're the fucking, they're the fucking alpha. Or whatever the fuck. And it isn't working, and it just keeps on going endlessly.
Involving, nuclear weapons that they're allegedly so afraid of but don't even exist. So it's just, what do you make of it? Am I being too harsh? Do you think that there are, significant disagreements between Trump and Netanyahu, or is it all kabuki theater?
Well, there are broadly two different types of stories I learned very early on when I started doing this. One is the story that gets given to you, that the White House or the executive branch agencies like the State Department or the Pentagon.
I don't recognize this guy, though he looks like a slight, if you were to add about 20 years to Lance from the Surfs, I'm just usually, here's a thing legacy media do, but that doesn't mean TYT that you have to not do it. Is you put a little title on the screen that says the name of the person you're talking to, so everybody knows the name. I'm assuming because we have this TYT interviews Will Chamberlain threatens Ken Klippenstein with jail time, so I'm guessing that must be Ken Klippenstein. I've read him. I've never actually seen a picture of the man, but okay, there we go. So
the White House or the executive branch agencies like the State Department or the Pentagon, the ones that they want out. The second kind of story is the one that they don't plant, and you have to do really hard work and go find. And
it's the kind you will never see Barack Ravid's byline on, because he just doesn't do that. He doesn't fucking. The last time he did any kind of fucking legwork, it was when he was at Unit 8200, and he gets very offended if you bring that up anymore.
Is an unauthorized story. It's not one that someone signed off on and wanted to be out there for public consumption. So I don't know Barack Ravid's specific stories, but that type of story, which is overwhelmingly the coverage.
Barack Ravid really only has one kind of story in the past few years, and he's been doing it since the Biden year. Ken Klippenstein is fairly well known. He's kind of, if you follow on Twitter, he actually does halfway, a lot of the time halfway decent investigative journalism stuff, and then he has shitty political takes, and he gets obsessed with, talking about the disabilities of people in Congress and stuff like that, which kind of sucks. But yeah, but I mean, on the whole, not, he's somebody that tends to be worth reading. I will say that. Okay, yeah, independent journalist Ken Klippenstein joins TYT. Yeah, okay. But, so Barack Ravid's only got one kind of story in the past few years, and it is always this breathless leak about some tense phone call between Netanyahu and first Biden and now Trump, and it's all, Biden was like having a fucking coronary, he was so pissed off, and now it's Trump's having a fucking coronary, he was so pissed off, and it's the same thing, and the whole idea is to create the impression that the U.S. cannot control Israel. That's the whole idea, and it's brought to you not just by the fucking White House, but by a so-called journalist whose background is with Israeli intelligence. They put his name up on screen, but the way it looked like it was just a chyron of new stories that were passing through. Okay, so this is Ken Klippenstein. Okay, fine. He really does look like an older Lance from the Surfs.
This conflict is obsessed with, palace intrigue, these leadership figures, people in the White House. It's very reflective of what the stuff that Washington's concerned with. What they don't do is go and talk to the military, who's actually carrying this stuff out, and who I talked to for this story, and I think give you a much different picture of what's taking place.
Well, I mean, and one thing, he also avoids asking the kind of questions that determine whether the story is anything. Because the real question with all of this is, like, was any actual order given? Was any actual leverage brought to bear? Did Biden, or now Trump, ever say, look, you're gonna do this, or we're gonna have to reconsider sending you all these fucking weapons, and you can find out if you serve briefly as a boat. But that's never in there. It's always just this atmosphere shit, where it's like, Biden says he's an asshole, Trump says everybody hates you guys.
And the reason you don't get that is because it's not designed for public consumption. You've got to really, I worked for the Young Turks previously. I've been doing this for like a decade now. You have to spend a lot of time learning the different parts of the agencies, who works where, who's going to have eyes on what. And so it is hard work.
Yeah, and you have to distinguish between some atmosphere bullshit and operative decisions. You have to actually understand, is an actual decision being made here? Has an actual instruction been made, or is this entirely for our benefit at home to make it look like the U.S. just can't possibly rein this regime in? They've just gone rogue with weapons, and they couldn't do it without the weapons we're sending, and we're still sending them.
But if you do it, you can actually find out what's going on, instead of this, like you're saying, theater of he's mad and they're mad, or are they not mad? Now they're not mad. And this theater that creates the impression that journalism is happening, that something is being covered, that the state is doing what it's supposed to do.
Well, crucially, it's also theater that exonerates the U.S. I mean, it's not just that it appears journalism is happening. I mean, there is that. But there is a reason it's this particular theater. There's a reason that ever since it became clear that the genocide in Palestine was absolutely unpopular. First there were indications that it was just unpopular with people who were, who voted for Democrats, and then they started doing broader polling like a year later, and it turned out everybody fucking hates it, and nobody thinks very highly of Israel anymore, really. And suddenly, when there were these first indications that the whole first initial Biden Democratic Party policy of rejecting a ceasefire out of hand were a bad idea, and they started to redefine ceasefire, and use that as the word to refer to what they'd previously been calling a humanitarian pause, where you give the Palestinians a snack before you kill them again. Then they had to create this whole idea that it was so hard to get a ceasefire. There's all, make it look like, that it took as many negotiations as it would take to get a literal peace treaty or something, which is not how ceasefires work. And then, in order to exonerate the U.S. and distance Biden and now Trump from what Biden and now Trump have been doing in Gaza through Israel, they come up with this bullshit. So it isn't just trying to make it look like journalism happens. You could make that about anything. This is about exonerating the U.S. and helping to resuscitate the idea that actually it's the lobby controlling everything.
But when you actually squint and look at the details, you realize, wait, there's nothing here. I didn't learn it. This doesn't tell me anything.
Well, I mean, it does tell you something. Even the most, blatant bullshit tells you something. It tells you what the person telling you that wants you to think. And that is a piece of information. It's not necessarily a great piece of information, but it's not something you should just dismiss either. Because there's a reason they want you to believe something. There's a reason they want you to believe there's all this conflict. It makes it look, because it makes the person in the White House, whoever it is, look less horrible. Like they're actually trying to do something good.
You're absolutely right. In fact, real journalists would question why someone in a position of power is leaking something to them. Because you don't do that unless you have an agenda, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, and even somebody who's not in a position of power. Everybody who is going and trying to make information public has some place they're trying to get with it. There is some agenda. That doesn't mean there's always a dishonest agenda. It doesn't always mean that it's a hidden agenda. Sometimes people are very straightforward and just come right out and say, I think I'm telling you my perspective on these things and telling you this information because I think I'm right, and I'd like you to do certain things as a result of it because I think that they would cause results that I hope we can all agree are correct. Sometimes people are just straightforward about their agenda, but there's always something. There's always some reason you're being told something. And one of just the first things of dealing with any kind of sources is, who's telling me this, in what context, and why do they want me to know it? Why do they care that I hear this particular piece of information right now? Because that's always there, and it helps you to understand what it is you're actually looking at. And if we taught media analysis, media literacy in schools the way we ought to in order to be able to develop an intellectual self-defense mechanism from all this propaganda, these are basic things that everybody would know about before they got out of school. Like, why are you telling me this? Understand it, analyze it, that sort of thing.
So,
it's key.
do you want to be a pawn? Do you want to be someone who's just used as a tool to carry out the agenda of government officials or people in positions of power, or do you want to actually hold power accountable, which is what journalism is supposed to do? And luckily you do that on a regular basis, Ken, which is why these, this information gets leaked to you. I would just say for any leakers within the Pentagon or the government, wherever they are,
don't go anywhere near the young turfs. Fuck knows what'll happen to them. I mean, they're bankrolled by fucking literal polymarkets. And polymarkets is full of people at the top level with direct ties to this administration. So if you're leaking something to them, you kind of have to worry that maybe it'll end up getting back to exactly the people you don't want it to.
In the Trump administration, don't even waste your time attempting to leak to legacy media journalists. Go straight to Ken. He'll publish it.
I would say that too. I would absolutely say that too. I'm a big fan of leakers, so signals in my Twitter bio. Reach out.
Love it. All right, everyone, and make sure you follow and subscribe to Ken Klippenstein's work.
I mean, the wild thing is, that actually wasn't bad. I was not sure exactly where that was going with, especially considering all the far-right bullshit that, TYT have been connecting themselves to in the past couple of years. That was not actually... But the thing is, they avoided the really key thing. They said, yeah, there's a reason you're being told this. Yes, there's a reason you're being told this. Why don't we... And, you know, surely you've got two people here, one of whom I think has occasionally shown some level of discernment, journalistically speaking. You would actually talk about that and say, okay, so what's the point of these stories, and what was the point of them back under Biden, too? Why are we being told this, but somehow we don't get that? Which is, like, that's the most important fucking part. Okay, here's something that showed up in my recommendations, and I thought, you know, just some bullshit to dunk on. Ask an ANCAP call-in show. Episode 14. I've never heard of this, I've never listened to it. It might be boring as shit, but I figure, why don't we check it out, because dunking on ANCAPs is occasionally fun. Wait, is it all just going to be text only? Is that... we won't be on here for very long if it's just text only.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Ask ANCAP. This is a weekly call-in show where we answer questions and challenges on the topic of anarcho-capitalism. My name is Galazar, and along with my co-host Liquid Zulu, we offer two unique approaches
great
advocating
names,
for
great
social
names.
cooperation and the natural rights. If you'd like to call and talk with us, please join the Discord, which is linked in the description, and join the voice chat channel called The Waiting Room.
Damn it, my mouse is being annoying. Okay, I'm going to skip. I didn't really need the introduction.
I'm focused particularly on his phrasing, what exactly does it mean to own a piece of land? And I think that that's going to be answered through just basic, like, property rights. And then...
Okay, this sounds like it could be interesting already.
Load the text questions, as well as the calls. So we're going to do text question number 2. And text question number...
So they're not getting many calls, it seems like.
Number 2 reads... Oh, it's kind of a long one. I'm going to read the beginning.
Ooh, it's kind of a long one.
Off, when I think we've got enough of the question. So, in anarcho-capitalist theory, what exactly does it mean to own a piece of land, and how are the boundaries of that ownership objectively determined? So we'll start.
Okay. I'm wondering, you know, since it is a text question, they could just copy-paste it up there and we could all look at it. Because I'm wondering, some people have started from this position in order to point out that when they talk about land ownership, they're actually talking about a state. It ends up being a state. It just happens to be a fucking throwback to feudalism. But okay, let's go.
So that was asking about how do you establish, like, what are the criteria for the border?
I think so. I'm focused particularly on his phrasing, what exactly does it mean to own a piece of land? And I think that that's going to be answered through just basic like property rights. And then the second aspect...
Well, no, it isn't. That's just restating it. Like, yes, owning a thing means having the property rights. Next question. Wow, that's... I learned a lot there. Yeah, that's very fucking enlightening.
If that sentence is, how are those boundaries objectively determined?
Oh, wait, he doesn't want to talk about what it means to own a piece of land. Maybe he's been burnt before with this one.
And I don't think he's asking for an example as much as what's the actual objective rule about what a boundary needs to accomplish.
Yeah, and why does anyone give a fuck?
Okay, so, yeah, the rule would be based in, well, how did we get to property rights in the first place? It was all about we want to avoid conflicts.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing that happens when you have like private ownership of land, is there's no conflict. It's all so fucking peaceful.
It's being mutually exclusive actions. So whatever this barrier you're erecting is, and it doesn't have to be like a literal fence or anything, has to be some sort of barrier that does in fact prevent mutually exclusive action. That there would be mutually exclusive actions.
Wait, what the hell are mutually exclusive actions?
If somebody tried to use it in some sort of way, which contravenes your will. Because if you haven't actually that is the barrier. The barrier is something which is imposing an economic cost upon engaging.
Oh, wait. I thought now it's imposing... Okay. And how is this avoiding conflict?
In those actions that you want to prevent. So then it depends entirely on what specifically that barrier needs to be on the specific type of property it is.
Okay, I'm speeding this up. I'm gonna give this a few minutes to get more interesting than this.
It's very thin. If it's a field, well, it's very simple. You just put up a fence. Now, that is indeed preventing people from walking along that field.
Wait, does he think that the question is how do you, like, fence off land?
Have successfully excluded those actions that you want to prevent. Now, you can
have you?
Certainly.
Like, what actions did you want to prevent?
You could just pop the fence or blow it up or so on and so forth. Just as you can, overcome somebody's exclusion of their body. If I really wanted to punch Galazar and, I overpowered him.
Somebody's exclusion of their... What is this language?
I would be able to overcome, his trying to prevent me from punching him in the face.
Wait, did he just say that he could kick Galazar's ass?
Doesn't mean that he doesn't own his body any longer. So I want to make that clear. So it's very simple.
Oh well, that's nice of you to make that clear.
It becomes more difficult when you start talking about less obvious forms of property. Probably the least obvious form would be something like guardianship. I think you can have a right over guardianship. It's the barrier becomes almost like ephemeral. Like you're not.
Wait. Guardianship is not a property. The guardianship is something you have over a person. It's not supposed to be a property right. Okay, is this... Okay, is he...
Having like a literal cage follow the child around, for instance. But yeah, that's the sort of standard. It's whether it does in fact prevent those potential actions.
Yeah, but can we get back to the part where you just said you considered children to be property?
Fantastic, and just in time for our first caller.
Absolutely fantastic. That was wonderful. Wow, no notes.
So the question about what's stopping us from establishing the anarcho-capitalist state of affairs. So Aurelius.
Well, the fact that it literally could not work. Just even in theory, it could not work. It makes absolutely no sense. And when you ask ANCAPs to explain it, to explain what it is they're going for, it immediately, you get something horrible. I mean, you just heard it. You just heard an example of it. And so one of the biggest barriers to imposing ANCAP ideology on the masses is that it sucks shit and doesn't make sense.
Can you hear us? Are you with us?
Yeah, it doesn't even make sense from the capitalist standpoint, because the capitalists, by and large, know they need a state in order for any of this stuff to work.
Hello, Aurelius.
For them, I mean.
You're on the air.
I can hear some sort of feedback from his mic, so it might not be plugged in properly.
Yes, I think you're right about that. Hello, can you hear us now? I heard him for a second there.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, so we're getting a lot of static from your microphone. Can you hear us?
Yes. Static.
It seems to be fixed now.
Yep, sounds better to me. Aurelius, you're on the air. We've got your question.
Aurelius, of course.
What's holding us back from getting to an anarcho-capitalist society? Is that right?
Yeah. What's blocking the development of an anarchist society?
Well, wait. Hold on. That's not the same thing.
Perfect. Well, Zulu, you want to get us started on that one?
Sure. So, I mean, yeah, this is a bell I feel that I ring quite a lot, namely the philosophical theory of history. Now I can come up with this.
Okay, which philosophical theory of history?
I believe Leonard Peacock came up with it, at least he's who I heard it from. So, the philosophy of the day that we currently have is wholly and totally opposed to anarcho-capitalism. You need a particular sort of philosophy.
Oh, okay, so you need a particular sort of philosophy. How do you get a particular sort of philosophy, though?
In order to get anarcho-capitalism popping out as legal theory, you need to, first of all, think that, well, there are these things called individuals, and that individual men are like the fundamental political unit, does it?
Individual men specifically. Yeah, I can't imagine why they would have trouble. Like, so I mean, first this guy said that he considers custody over children to be a property right, that the children are something you own. And now he speaks of right holders as just individual men. Well, yeah, it's funny, really, when you think about it, because these are anarcho-capitalists, and yet all I'm seeing are red flags.
Were as against the collective. Hegel most societies are very much in the Hegelian sort of viewpoint that, no, the collective is what matters. And you'll hear people, they'll couch it in different language, they won't be so crude with it. But they'll say things like, well, no, we need to care about the community. You shouldn't...
Wow, that's so terrible that we should care about each other.
Be selfish, you shouldn't be selfish thinking only about yourself. We need community cohesion, stuff like that.
You need to have a functioning society.
See that sort of attitude cropping up a lot, and that comes right down into the metaphysics of, well, it's the classic divide against from Aristotle versus Plato. Plato thought the really real thing was the form of man, manness as such, which is of course shared by all men. So
wait, this is why this is you chat. If you're just like coming in here or you like stepped out for a second, this is this guy trying to explain why anarcho-capitalism isn't happening. It's apparently due to Aristotle and Hegel. It's their fault. And the fault of people who think that social cohesion is probably a good thing.
The collective, which is the fundamental unit of reality there, whereas Aristotle turns that around and says, no, the individual is the only real thing. Show me this form of man, in effect.
It's like literally the only form you really ever see humans in, though. I mean, you just hold up a fucking mirror to Aristotle. Hey, look, you're in a fucking society.
So if you have individualist metaphysics, well, then you can start to get an individualist legal theory coming out, which it's necessary but not sufficient. You could have an individualist metaphysics and have other bad premises elsewhere, which...
So their goal is to start with the metaphysics. I mean, it's really kind of nice to hear this. Because not only do they have an absolutely horrible idea of how society ought to work, but they also don't know what the hell they're talking about when it comes to making it happen. Like, the people who actually bankroll this stuff understand that it is just a useful thing to sort of confuse people and distract grievance-driven upper-middle-class white dudes into, getting obsessed with Ayn Rand and fucking Mises. But none of them actually really want this to happen because they know without a state, they're nothing. Bonsoir.
Kind of contradict the individualism and metaphysics.
And caps make individualist anarchists look good. Yeah.
Contradicting philosophies. And the type of society you get, that is dependent entirely on what the philosophy is of the people who make up that society.
Like, did they just deliberately decide to come up with the most, did they just look at materialism and try to find just do the exact opposite? We're gonna have the ideas, and then that's suddenly going to cause the society to reform itself. It's gonna reformat itself because of what's in our brain stuff.
So, if you have 90% of people in a society at least implicitly, are not actively opposed to, say, communism, and there are some rabid communist agitators who are in power, well, then that's going to be the philosophy of the day, and that's going to be the exact type of society you get. It's not random. Right? It's not random that, for instance, Germany went Nazi at that point in time. Now, it could have gone some other sort of collective.
It's not random. None of it is really random. But your whole idea is there was a philosophy in the air. Yeah, that's why there was a philosophy, and you gotta watch out for that. You gotta watch out for there being a philosophy in the air.
But it was due for collectivism. That's sort of the point I want to drive home there. It was due to have that collectivism. Same with the Soviet Union. It was due to have some sort of Hegelian collectivism take over at that point. That's just what the philosophy, the arrow of history, as it were pointing to.
Yeah, I mean, famously, the Soviet Union, big on Hegel.
Towards. It didn't have to be Marxism-Leninism. It could have been some other sort of collectivism, but it was going to be some sort of collectivism at that point. So, and for us to have the anarcho-capitalist society, we would need that same arrow of history to be pointing us towards an anarcho-capitalist society or something.
So, in order for it to happen, things would have to be moving in that direction. Like, this is the level of thought we're dealing with here. Okay, skipping ahead. Wow, that's an amazing theory of history. To become the philosophy of the day, it must first convince the philosophers. Wow, yeah. Totally. I mean, everything has happened because somebody convinced the philosophers of stuff.
Mathematics and physics. That's looking at things as they actually are, and not this philosophy going to do, because that's.
Wow. Mathematics and physics is looking at things as they actually are. You know, it's funny because scientists would say there's actually still a mediation going on there. That you're trying to approximate things as they actually are, but you always have to be aware of the fact that you're looking at it through a particular lens, and that can distort things. But this guy knows better, because he understands that the real gatekeepers of a society, the way you make the society change, is you talk to the philosophers and you say, hey, philosophers, I got an idea that makes sense. Why don't you adopt it? And they're like, wow, this doesn't make any sense at all, but it would be really fun to watch everything collapse, so I guess we'll do it.
The impression I had of philosophy, until I came across objectivism, I was like, oh, no, that's not all of philosophy. There's philosophy outside of what I've later come to understand is like intersectionalism, Kantianism, Hegelianism. There is
the three major philosophical tendencies: intersectionalism, Hegelianism, and Kantianism.
Philosophy outside of that. That's the dominant sort of philosophy these days, but it's not the only philosophy.
Gotcha. And it seems like you sort of are focusing more on like the ends or goals of that, like what that anarchist society would be, what the implications are from a philosophical lens, rather than like the means or techniques to get there. And do you think that'll just come about that human...
Hey, the guy calling in also isn't impressed.
Activity and ingenuity will just bring those about once most people are, or once a critical mass of people are anarcho-capitalist subjectivists.
What?
Yes, because I think all of the specific like implementation details, those are all downstream. If we're getting to the point where it's possible to start implementing some of these bigger steps, like, we're, New Hampshire seceding from the Union and dissolving its government. But we've already done all of the hard work, if that's like a real option on the table. And
wait, and he thinks that this will happen if you convince philosophers of something.
So I don't think it's particularly worthwhile trying to theorize, decades in the future, what the exact political situation will look like, where some...
I have to say, rare situation where... Rare ANCAP W, yeah, and that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. To try to work out, the details of how a post-revolutionary society works. That's true. That doesn't make sense because it's in a fundamentally different context. There's all sorts of stuff that's going to happen. And also, supposedly, we want everybody to be involved in deciding what that's going to look like. But in the context where everything else is about, well, you convince the philosophers, and then the philosophers will philosophize, and then everyone will be like, holy shit, ANCAP stuff totally isn't nonsense. We want to live our lives like this somehow, and, you know, it's better to have a terrible end than terror without end, or whatever.
That is happening, and try to pre-implement it and, you know, centrally plan liberty, as it were. I think that's a mistake. I don't think it's worthwhile doing at all. Now, there are interesting things you can say about it. You know, as like an economist, Hans Hoppe, he wrote this great book, The Private Production of Defense. What things you can say about it. You know, as like an economist, Hans Hoppe, he wrote this great book, The Private Production of Defense, where he goes over his sort of economic analysis of how he reckons there could be such a thing as purely private defense services. Now, he's doing that.
Well, yes, and who would own them?
As an economist, not necessarily as like a political strategist there. He's not saying, so we need to start investing in making our own like insurance agencies or anything.
Wait. Okay. See, I think this is, I really hope that this is widespread thinking amongst ANCAPs, because it means they're not actually really doing anything about it. That would be a relief. We wouldn't... Oh, link spam. Link spam. Goodbye, link spam. Yeah. Just...
Not saying that. Because, of course, his point is that, well, insurance is being massively crippled by the state. That's at least one of the theses he makes in that book.
It's been... wow, insurance really needs to have the state get out of the way, because without the state, insurance could do amazing things. Like, everybody wanted to... That's what we all want, is to unleash the potential of the insurance industry. Because that's been so great for us. Skipping ahead...
You have things like qualified immunity, where police officers can do things that are just flagrantly aggressive and illegal and get away with it.
Private courts rather than public services. Like, we already have this. It's called arbitration, and it sucks shit. You'll find it in contract. Ever since a case called St. Clair and Circuit City in the U.S. Supreme Court about 20 years ago, you'll see these provisions cropping up in all kinds of contracts. And what it is you are being forced to forego an actual court with all the problems that already has in favor of a private court that doesn't really have to follow the law and is beholden to whoever's paying them.
You're just allowed to do that. That's not a feature of a anarcho-capitalist legal system, for sure. And that's just an example of one very important but just isolated example. We shouldn't give the skeptic we shouldn't grant them that the law is working any proper way that it is currently. We have things like qualified immunity, where police officers can do things that are just flagrantly aggressive and illegal.
Oh, okay, so yes, the existing law in this capitalist system sucks shit. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that your idea is going to be better.
And get away with it. They're just allowed to do that. That's not a feature of a anarcho-capitalist legal system, for sure.
Well, yes, because there are no laws that these people would be bound by in the first place. They could just do whatever the fuck they want anyway, because they own everything.
And that's just an example of one very important but just isolated example of how, in an anarcho-capitalist society, police would have the incentive not to do things like that, because they don't have something like qualified immunity.
Wait, why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they have qualified immunity? Why wouldn't they just give it to themselves? In fact, why the fuck are there cops in the first place in your fucking supposed anarchist society?
I don't personally, I'm not aware of any arguments on why qualified immunity is an appropriate constraint to have in your society. What do you think about that so far, Bazuna?
I think a lot of, arguments to say that police shouldn't get special privileges, I think they would, again, grant me. But I think they would also agree that the current system doesn't work perfectly.
But, I mean, police inherently have special privileges. The whole point of them is that they have the special privilege to do violence to people in the name of the state.
Problem is convincing them that this system would work better.
Yeah, it is
Well,
a problem.
I mean, it's difficult to... We can only speculate on what's going to be effective for convincing any given person. I think that, for me, what I found to be the most consistently effective is to show specific examples, like qualified immunity. Where
You haven't actually shown it. You just... That isn't an example of your thing being better. That's just an example that basically any reasonable person who's heard of it can agree on as something that that sucks shit in the present society. The question is, why exactly would it have to be any different here?
The system gets in the way of justice, and also to focus on the incentives. So you gave a second example here.
Well, I mean, the incentive is kind of obvious for qualified immunity, because the class on whose behalf the violence is being done would like to ensure that the people doing the violence are insulated from accountability. And why exactly would that be different in an ANCRAP society?
Where laws will be created because they're profitable, but not because they're actually proper. So...
Okay, yeah, so let's see you try to... You didn't handle the last thing. Let's see you handle this one.
Well, maybe that's an example, like you can't wear red shorts on the weekend, because then the police can fine you and fund their police department that way. Well, what we're advocating...
Oh, well, I mean, or... for example, that it's okay to dump forever chemicals into drinking water because that's less expensive for the factory that is abutting that body of water. I mean, there are a million examples you could give. You don't have to go with red shorts. Like, is that the only example they can think of laws protecting profit rather than the public? The idea where a law is made just so you can fine people for it and make money off of the fines? And how are you going to have these laws? There's no state, supposedly, in anarcho-capitalism, last I heard. So, what the hell are these laws? Surely the idea is that we all either agree that these things are the law or we don't agree, and if we don't agree, then we don't have to do them? Like, what the hell are we talking about here?
Is not a totally chaotic system that's simply... We just want to get rid of the state and then we're satisfied. We're advocating for a system.
Okay, that is confirmation that there's no state. Fine. Then what the hell is law? What is law? You have to actually, if you're going to make this argument and say that there is something that you would call law, in the absence of a state, then you have to actually say what it is. Because law is literally, it is orders given by the state that are backed up by threats. Like Ronald Dworkin, the liberal legal philosopher, spent multiple books, in my recollection, trying to find some way that law was anything other than that. And I don't think he ever succeeded. Because that is really all it ever was.
Idea that's founded on the ideas of social cooperation, and for Zulu and I, that specifically means the non-aggression principle. So,
wait, okay, social cooperation, except you think that social cohesion is bad. Make it make sense.
If you have a society of people who are adhering to the non-aggression principle, you can't also presuppose that they are aggressing on each other.
Okay, if you're not familiar with the non-aggression principle, it's one of these things that sounds really good until you start getting into examples. Because the idea is that what's wrong is initiating violence. And I think, in the absolute, just total abstract, you can listen to that and say, okay, that makes sense, that sounds legit. And then it turns out, when workers go on strike because they don't like how they're being treated by their boss, because their boss will not actually, pay them a living wage or whatever, that is initiating violence, so that is breaching the non-aggression principle. Whereas a boss, forcing workers to work in toxic conditions is not aggression, because the boss is just exercising property rights. And the minute you know about this, the whole thing falls apart.
In the way that would be implicit in charging people money on trumped-up charges that only exist to line the pockets of the police state.
Yeah, but what would prevent it, though?
the police department. So I guess the concern there is like, well, what's going to stop the police department? And
Yeah, that is the question. Because there's no state. We have no definition of what law is or how it happens, or why anyone is at all required to follow it. Like, what is law? You have to at least give a fucking definition. Like, if we say it's a generally agreed upon idea, something that we all, in a particular territorial unit get together and say, at least for the moment, this is how we're going to do things, in a particular regard. That is one, you could call that law. You could call that something else, too. But you could theoretically kind of call that law. He's not saying that. And the entire, if you wanted, in a communist society, first of all, the first thing is there wouldn't be money, so there wouldn't be fines, so that would be bullshit. Also, there's there's also no state, so there's no cops. That because what the fuck are cops still doing there? Those are kind of statish. But to the extent that there are rules, there are things that we're all working out together in one way or another. So you couldn't just have somebody say, okay, it's a rule that people can't wear red shorts on a Tuesday. Because other people would be like, no, that's nonsense. Why would you do that? Shut the fuck up. But apparently in their system that they're suggesting that it doesn't occur to them to say this wouldn't be permitted because that
a society that observes the non-aggression principle, there is a broadly understood criterion that distinguishes between legally permissible and legally impermissible.
Wait, there's a broad. That's the whole point of law, though, is to say what is legally permissible and what is impermissible. The whole point of having things, of imposing legal duties and legal prohibitions is to say, doing this thing, permissible. Not doing this thing, impermissible. The whole point is that you have specific things so people can say, hey, hang on, I think I'm skating a little bit close to the edge here. And I don't want to go over. Or whatever. But now, this is just so fucking vague.
So, if a police department, let's assume that there's, just to sort of go along with the hypothetical here, let's assume there's a whole bunch of competing police departments. And one police department...
Oh wow, that's great. Doesn't that sound like a society you'd like to live in? A bunch of fucking competing police departments. So, they're all competing, they all have guns, and every call that one of them takes, if they get there first, I guess they get paid or something like that. So this sounds like a wonderful society. Why shouldn't we have 20 different fucking different bodies of cops in one jurisdiction, all competing with each other to maximize their profits? How could you not love a society like that?
Engages in this behavior where they're taking your money from you because you're wearing red shorts. Well, there's nothing in natural law that permits that. That's
natural law. What do you mean? There's nothing in that? Natural law is something we make up. Natural law is something there isn't. You can't go. There isn't a book of natural law where you can go and say, "Oh, Section 15 of natural law says red shorts permissible at all times, assuming the wearer is doing so of their own accord," or something like that. There's nothing that says that. Natural law is just some shit that we made up, and people make it up as they go along. So somebody could say, "Okay, it's against natural law now to fucking wear red shorts." Natural law says if you wear red shorts, you have to pay me $100 each time I see you.
Outside of natural law. Now you can say, yes, this is happening in the absence of a state, but we're not advocating for the absence of a state.
I thought you were a second ago.
We're advocating for natural law and
What the hell? Okay, and what the hell is natural law? What does natural law say? And how do we actually know? See, there is a lot of uncertainty in an existing bourgeois legal system. I mean, I've talked about just what a labyrinth U.S. immigration law is. But at least there is something written down, and you can go to it and say, okay, section 1224 of Title 10, whatever, says that the acceptable limits for the content of whatever are within however much, etc. You can look at it, and then, and then you look at the jurisprudence, and it turns out there's all sorts of debate over what any of those words means. And it turns out it's interpreted in ways that you would not expect, because somebody came up with all sorts of weird-ass interpretations of what each word means, but at the very least, you've got something to go on. Natural law is just... yeah, I think that sounds legit.
Recognizing that implies the absence of a state. It's very different. So, in a natural law society...
So their anarcho-capitalist society has a state? So where's the anarcho come in? There is a state, there are cops, and the legal system is just a black box. It's just natural law, whatever the hell that is.
If there are these aggressions taking place, regardless of if the aggressors are wearing police badges or not, that means that there's an incentive for everybody else to... I mean, there's an incentive to resist them. There's also... So the legal standard makes it clear that resisting them is justified.
What legal standard? I thought, where do you go to see this legal standard?
So, in a sense, in order to make that hypothetical even work, what you're really just describing, or what your skeptics are describing, is just an outside attacker. Because they have to alienate themselves from the principles that we're talking about to such a degree that you're really just talking about the people...
The principles don't mean shit. Because, again, okay, I mean, I've actually seen ANCAPs argue that their wonderful, nifty-ass non-aggression principle says that workers don't have the right to strike for better pay and conditions and stuff like that. That property owners, the owners of their workplaces, get to decide, freely what their, what pay and what conditions to offer them, and workers, the only option is that they can fuck off if they don't like it. Well, so cops can, so in this anarcho-capitalist society that has a state and not just one police department, but multiple competing police departments, they can all compete to kick your ass as a worker for going on strike because you have violated the non-aggression principle. And they're competing to see who can do it best because they're the ones who'll get the contract, I guess.
Who are interested in social cooperation against outsiders who are attacking them, regardless of if they have a police badge or not. So I'd like to hand it over to you there. And see.
But why? So, are you saying they're automatically outsiders? If they do certain things, they're automatic. Wait, this.
With that approach.
Yeah,
I mean, the thing about ANCAPs is I don't feel like you could look at this and think I'm strawmanning them by even treating this as a statement of their philosophy. But I've spent enough time looking at what they have to say, and it never makes more sense than this. Though usually, I mean, just saying, we're not necessarily saying there's no state. Like, then why are the so there's a state, but the police departments are all private? So what makes it a state? What does the state do, exactly, in an ANCAP society? I mean, it doesn't legislate because it's just natural law. What does that mean? Unclear.
One sort of thing which I think needs to be pointed out is that these aren't, because obviously a particularly quick-witted minarchist could keep coming up with more and more excuses for why the state is different in specifically this one area.
Wait. Does he think there isn't a state?
Why it works in specifically this one area. So what is useful to do is to point out, these problems we've gone over that our hypothetical minarchist has conceded to, like qualified immunity, so on and so forth. These aren't just, they happen to be involved in the current state system, but they don't have to be involved. They are rooted in problems which are fundamental to socialism itself. There are many problems fundamental to socialism. For instance,
Wait, qualified immunity is inherent in socialism, apparently. So why the fuck do the cops in the U.S. have qualified immunity then?
Economic calculation problem. You can't have economic calculation for any social system, including police. Like, there's the classic argument. It's like, oh, no, wow, we need to provide defense for you to even have the market in the first place. It's like, okay, well, how much defense? Should it be a cop every few blocks with it?
Well, okay, I did not follow that at all. Let's try that again.
Any social system, including police, like, economic calculation, rooted in problems which are fundamental to socialism itself. There are many problems fundamental to socialism. For instance, economic calculation problem. You can't have economic calculation for...
Wait, you can't have economic calculation
for any social system, including police. Like, there's the classic argument. It's like, oh, no, wow, we need to provide defense for you to even have the market in the first place. It's like, okay, well, how much defense? Should it be a cop every few blocks with a...
Well, like, okay, but the minute you're doing this, you're already saying that they are doing a calculation.
With a handgun in his pocket, should it be tanks rolling down the streets? Should it be predator drones overhead? There's...
Oh, wait, so the idea is there are different options. These guys both really want to have lots of cops, I get the feeling. I mean, the guy on top here, Galazar, was talking about how he wants, like, multiple competing police departments in a jurisdiction. And this guy thinks maybe give them tanks and predator drones too. Wow, this is, I mean, wow, just so free to me.
All sorts of different amounts of defense that you can provide for people's property. So how much should you provide? In what way should you provide? These are questions that the socialist central planner cannot answer.
Why not? I mean, you can answer them, certainly. You look at what makes sense, and you do it, and maybe you get it right, and maybe you don't, but you can certainly answer it. Like, why is that a hard question to answer?
As Mises shows us. And this is...
Mises... That's so interesting to say that Mises shows us anything. Because Mises' whole thing was... he rejected empiricism. He rejected the idea that theories should be tested and proven. Which is convenient for him because his does not hold up very well to that sort of thing.
Really, what I take as, like, the central thrust of Anatomy of the State by Murray Rothbard is that, well, there are actually these necessary problems with states, and in fact, somebody brought this up in chat, and the necessary problem with it is that it fails to recognize that the state is simply another criminal gang. That's...
The other guy here was just saying that he isn't even completely sold on there not being a state.
Fundamentally what the state is. It's not staffed by angels. They aren't a different species than us.
Well, okay, but and you're talking about giving the cops fucking tanks. So are you saying, wait, I mean, the guy, your co-host was just talking about how there should be more cops, not no cops, and you were just talking about giving them tanks.
Just a group of people who come together and formed a very powerful criminal gang that seeks to exclude all other criminal gangs and be the sole criminal of the land. And that is fundamentally what the state is. So you can't square that with protecting rights. You can't have a rights-protecting violator of rights. That's a...
Well, it depends on whose.
Contradiction in terms. So there will always be, if you went on the ethical side, that is, there will always be some crimes that the state necessarily has to commit. It necessarily has to do these crimes, or else it's no longer a state. For instance, the state will necessarily have to enforce a monopoly over this stuff, right?
I mean, actually, a state literally is a monopoly over this stuff. But your co-host seems to think that should exist in what you're calling anarcho-capitalism, alongside the world's vaguest law.
Enforcing monopoly, that's criminal. It's trying to prevent people from setting up their own system of enforcing people's rights and profit off that, and so on and so forth. And in order to keep this exclusion up, it's going to have to forcibly take money from people.
No. I don't think so. I get the impression that he tries to stay as far away from that as possible. He described earlier the three philosophical tendencies in the world as intersectionalism, Hegelianism, and Kantianism.
Right. That's what protection rackets do. This fantasy that some anarchists have of like a purely voluntarily funded state is just that. It's nonsense. Nobody. That's a terrible business proposal there.
I mean, it's a terrible business proposal. That's what he's got.
Provide something so good, the best thing you can ever imagine. It's going to work on providing that to people, and but it's going to provide it to everybody, no matter if they pay or not. And we just reckon that if the philosophy is correct, then people will, of their own free will and their own good graces, they'll give us money voluntarily and for no extra service. No, that business would never work for the very best thing possible. And I don't think.
Courses you'll have out there, whether you're online on Discord or if you just talk to people.
Okay, we've looked at these guys enough, I think, for now. We've got a few minutes left, and I thought we might, Kyle Kolinsky's having a very normal one, trying to...
So the Graham Plattner scandal has backfired spectacular.
Yeah, trying to deal with
and,
the fact that, in addition to being a war criminal, I mean, who is proud of it? Like, there's no evidence that people talk about fucking... I've been hearing for months that Plattner supposedly is an anti-war vet. He understood that he was on the wrong side of the history and he decided to make amends. And that is what I've been hearing all this time. And it turns out, no. Like, his writings about his time in the military is all about how fucking cool it was to get paid by the state to go and murder brown people. And he was involved in some of the worst atrocities in the U.S. war against Iraq, including the Fallujah massacre. And he thought it was based. And now it turns out he's also a fucking sex pest. So... and, there's that Nazi tattoo that he lied about and then only ever thought to get rid of to just cover up a little bit when he started running for office. So, in the midst of this, Kyle Kolinsky, who otherwise, often talks some kind of sense, he's not doing well.
Happened as the smear merchants wanted to happen. So let me go ahead and walk you through this. First, let me show you. Senator John Fetterman goes off on Graham Plattner. Quote.
Okay, Fetterman has absolutely no place to talk. But, when I was growing up, if someone had a Nazi tattoo, you pretty much assume he's a Nazi sympathizer. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's an assumption at that point. That is a Nazi thing to do. Like, at the very least, is totally consistent with just being a fascist.
There's P. Hustle. I guess that was his nickname on one of the hookup apps until they... I think this is like an epic burn. He continues, "We didn't match up on Kick, so I haven't seen him yet," Fetterman says, adding that he'd love to meet him. "I mean, he's a tough guy. When I was growing up, if someone had a Nazi tattoo, you pretty much assume he's a Nazi sympathizer."
Yeah, I mean, naturally Fetterman doesn't look at the fact that he's also a war criminal. Because Fetterman likes war criminals, he likes war crimes, and that is something that endears him.
Expressed frustration with how I dress, and this asshole is on Kick, sexting to a dozen women. So as I pointed out, as you can see...
Oh, wow, I mean, like...
Here, right underneath, I said, literal bloodlusting child mass murder supporter. Bro, can you believe the affairs this guy had?
Well, you're not exactly mentioning something that he differs from Plattner on. Plattner never gave any indication that maybe he thought that he shouldn't have gone off and murder all those people until he filed to be a candidate. Like, this man has zero fucking skin in the game. There is absolutely no reason to believe a word he says, and it is just amazing how many people have decided who, like, otherwise might have been suspected of some level of discernment, some kind of standards, have become ride or die for this guy.
Can you believe that, bro? Here's the most disturbing point. Everybody who's accusing Plattner of being a Nazi, they 100% know with certainty he's not a Nazi.
What makes you think that? I mean, the Nazi tattoo, the fact that he is on, read it for years, clearly knew exactly what it was. The fact that he thought it was really cool and adventurous to murder a whole bunch of people in Iraq and Afghanistan and went to and joined Blackwater, all of this, I mean, it's kind of, it's not giving Nazi, let me put it that way.
So it is the most dishonest political attack I think I've ever seen. When you know for sure the person is not a Nazi, but you're...
How do you know for sure? Are you going to tell us, Kyle?
Still hurling accusations of him being a Nazi. That just means you're dishonest. That just means...
Let me slow him down a little bit.
You're disingenuous. That just means you're full of shit. That just means you're going after the lowest common denominator, most dipshit, dumbass attacks I've ever...
Oh, wait, okay. So the fact that he has a Nazi tattoo and lied about it, like, okay, fuck Fetterman. But if you're going to say you know for a fact this guy isn't fash, given his record, which is not good and is not inconsistent with being fash, you're gonna have to actually give some examples. You're gonna...
Ever seen in my life. That's what that is. And it also shows you they actually can't discuss the substance. And it's not a coincidence, by the way.
Okay, let's discuss the substance. Give us the substance of why this guy couldn't possibly be fash.
That Donald Trump's favorite Democrat, who Trump is literally in the midst of recruiting to become a Republican, is the one who's leading the charge against Grant Platter. That's not a...
Well, yeah, it's very convenient to select him because, yeah, he's a piece of shit. He is a talking turd. Everybody knows that. Everybody fucking hates him for it. A lot of other people are saying this too, because the thing is, the creepy shit and the Nazi shit and the war criminal shit, it kind of adds up, and you have to say, why is this the fucking hill we're dying on?
Fucking coincidence. Because remember, the concern a lot of people have had about Platter is, oh, I think he's going to do an about-face and become the next Fetterman. Real?
Yeah, and he's already made... I mean, this is after this video was recorded. So Kyle Kulinski could not have seen this because it hadn't happened yet. But he gave a speech just on the campaign trail where he described what he was doing when he went off to commit war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan as fighting for freedom. And it's like, yeah, no. That sounds kind of about-facey to me, actually. And yeah, but the thing is, there's absolutely nothing that indicates that any of this stuff is a real commitment for him. Because he's never done anything. He just owns a fucking oyster company. He's an oyster cracker.
If that's the case, why does Fetterman himself fucking despise him? It's almost like he's the opposite of John Fetterman.
I think maybe he despises him because he was him on a certain level. Fetterman knows what it's like to have people think that you're this great progressive person that they all love because of your aesthetic, and entirely because of your aesthetic, because you've got absolutely nothing to back it up with. And then for people to realize that you suck and turn on you completely because they find out who you really are and they hate you. And I think he hates seeing somebody who is getting the amount of charitable assumptions that Plattner is getting, precisely because that was him once. That is actually where I would... That's what it seems to me, anyway.
In every imaginable way.
But, I mean, this would be a much stronger argument if it was just Fetterman pointing this out. Plenty of people are pointing it out. Most of them hate Fetterman.
John Fetterman doesn't like him. The real reason John Fetterman doesn't like him is because Graham Plattner is anti-Israel, and he's anti-genocide, and he's...
Well, like, has been since he filed for the campaign. Whether that means anything at all, probably not, because that's not how this works. Absolutely remains to be seen. He has shown no fucking, like, was he involved in any kind of Palestine Solidarity organization? If he has, it's been kept a secret. Was he involved in any kind of anti-war vet stuff? Nobody seems to have found any evidence of it. The clue, what we have of him, sort of mentally processing his time in the military is his Reddit posts. And his Reddit posts and his fucking Blackwater refrigerator magnet all kind of suggest that actually this regret is just fucking posturing. There's no sign that it actually led him to draw political conclusions that will last for longer than a fucking primary.
Anti-war. And all of those things...
Yeah, he's been anti-war for 5 minutes. Like, he's been anti-war for about as long as Tucker Carlson has been. And we're just going to accept that. Like, no skepticism at all. After the experience of Fetterman, after the experience of so many of these supposed, like, maverick Democrats who are going to actually, who, breathe air and drink water and are from the same planet as the people who vote for them and all that shit. Like, no skepticism about that. No skepticism after AOC. No skepticism after Obama. Like, how the fuck do you have no skepticism about this? We've seen this fucking script.
Fetterman takes the opposite position. He's pro-war, he's pro-Israel, he's pro-genocide. He's also the most pro-Trump Democrat that there is.
Yes, remind us, is that how he sounded when he was campaigning for the seat?
He has more as a Democrat, Fetterman has more kind things to say about MAGA and Trump than he does about Graham Plattner, who every time Graham opens his mouth, he's ranting against war, he's ranting against Israel, he's ranting against the billionaires, he's ranting in defense of minority communities.
He's campaigning. He knows that these things are likely to actually win him something, and it's a hell of a lot, and it's a way not to talk about the other stuff he could be talking about, like his actual record.
That's the other thing that drives me crazy is when people pretend like, because he's got like the gruff MAGA white guy aesthetic, therefore, like he's not woke enough when it comes to minority communities. He literally has it in his repertoire when he gives speeches. And when
he has it in his repertoire, chat. I mean, we can totally trust that. I mean, we've never been at all bamboozled by politicians having woke shit in their repertoire and then not doing it. You know, like how every politician who was anyone, including a lot of Republicans, were saying trans rights back about a decade ago. And, there's still no LGBT Civil Rights Act in federal law. Like, it's almost as if having it in your fucking repertoire doesn't mean shit.
Does interviews and when he does town hall events, one of his main lines is, people need to understand, minority communities are not the problem. Trans kids are not the problem. Black people, immigrants, minorities are not the problem. Muslims...
Yeah, okay, yes, he talks a good game. But what was he doing related to any of this before it became in his interest to do it for a campaign?
Are not the problem. Jews are not the problem. The problem are the billionaires. He says that shit. He says it. But somehow that doesn't matter, and he's somehow like...
Campaigning? Like, wait, are you saying that there's a history of people saying some stuff when they're campaigning that they don't necessarily believe and they don't intend to necessarily do anything about? God, like, are you that cynical that you wouldn't trust a politician on the campaign trail?
Anti-woke and fucking right-wing on social issues when he's not. The only issue he is right-wing on is guns. And he fucking comes from Maine, which is like, of course somebody from Maine is going to be like that, right?
Oh, well, okay. First of all, the idea that... I mean, I guess he's saying that he... Yeah, because he actually said, and this was I actually was kind of glad to hear it being said. He said something about the importance of an armed working class. And, yeah, that isn't a right-wing position, actually, Kyle. If you, like, decide to break out of your comfort zone and look to the left of you, you will find actually quite a few people who actually kind of feel similarly about that. Because an armed working class looks pretty good in a situation when the working class is under the kind of attack the working class is under right now. But the thing is, again... Why do we believe any of this? It has only shown up since he's been campaigning. It's not like you can point to some history of him doing stuff with, like, the Palestinian Solidarity Council in his area, or BDS campaigning, or, you know, the GI rights hotline that helps people get out of the military if they don't want to fight in criminal fucking wars of aggression. Yeah, there's no evidence of him doing any of that. So all we have is the fact that he's saying things that poll well during a campaign, and Kyle wonders why we're skeptical. But I just noticed the time. It is time to wrap up. Thank you so much for joining in. It's always good to see you. I hope you enjoyed the stream. I will be back tomorrow at 11:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, and I look forward to seeing you then.